Okay. This Hyundai dealership used to be Sand Salvage. And look what's down the road here. Sorry for the wind noise, got the windows down. This is for all you nostalgia people. This building straight ahead. This building to the left was not there. BJ's was not there. So this building to the left, that was full of brush. I mean, other than some paint and trim, the building has not changed. My father worked here in the 60s into the 70s. And then my mom worked here briefly in the office. But my father was a truck driver. My father would come from Corona, Queens, out to Farmingdale, okay, to work here as a driver. And yeah. And then right next door here where it says BJ Gas, this was one of those like sump things that they use for water runoff. Okay, so we're gonna go in here. So this didn't exist right here. This was one of those sumps. That's what we used to call them. I don't know what the term is. I guess that's a Long Island thing. So this was a sump here, and it would fill up every spring with tadpoles. And the workers would come out here. This was after my father was unable to work because my father became handicapped. But my mom was still here for a couple of years. And they would come here, and when they were baby toads, and she'd bring home boxes and boxes and boxes of toads for us. I mean, the boxes were like this thick, and you know, big crates of toads. And this is where the story gets a little weird. The crates were made of wood, and they had a wooden strip around them, wooden band. And I'm looking for this type of crate. And we would make what they call crate guns. And you gotta even understand, we're going back to the late 60s, early 70s. Things were a little different then. Okay? Even Fred Flintstone was smoking cigarettes. And I'm just trying to get past these driving people, and I'll explain the story. So let's go back to the left a second. So the workers, okay, who were obviously good friends with my dad, out of respect of my dad, they would go next door and they would fill up these crates. Just looking for a spot to park. Back office parking. And they'd fill up these crates with these toads, and there'd be hundreds of toads. And the crates would be made of wood, and they would have a wooden strip around them. And what we would do is, and my father showed us this when we were really young, is you take off a piece of the strip with a 90 degree, and you cut it, and you made it like, I don't know, 4 inches on one end and like 6 inches on the other. And where the two pieces of wood met, you would file it or do it with a hacksaw and make a little notch. And then they would have these big industrial rubber bands in the warehouse, and you would hook the rubber band underneath, wrap it over, and put it on the little notch. Okay? And right at the back by the notch, you'd put a piece of puzzle. And you just flick it with your finger, and the puzzle would come off. And we call them either puzzle guns or crate guns. Little did my parents know, okay, things were a little different then, you know. Helicopter moms, soccer moms, and all that didn't exist back then. Back then, we lived on a block. It had 23 houses on it. The development was new, okay, and all the blocks were like square. It was almost like being in Queens, but we weren't. We were out here in Suffolk County, and there was 40 some odd kids. And my oldest brother's 9 years older than me. And there was kids from that group to my age group. So everybody played together, but as the older ones, got older, they left. And we would take these toads. Well, back then we thought they were frogs. But we would take these toads and we'd just throw a bunch of them out on the street. And everybody would have their puzzle gun. And we just start poof, 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 killing the toads. We also found out how hard they could fly, how fast you could throw them at the ground. All cruel things that if I saw Junior doing when he was a kid, I would have been like horrified. But, things were different back then. So I'm still looking for, and I've been looking for this for quite a while. I'm looking for that kind of wood, and I'm going to speak to John at Scoutcrafter about it, because he knows about a lot more vintage things than I know about when it comes to all this stuff. And maybe he could at least give me the dimensions. And I'd really like to make an authentic one from an old crate. And when he bought that crate at the last thing, when I saw him interested in the crate, I don't think it has the banding on it. But when I first saw the old crate, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Then when I saw that he was interested, because he only buys limited things. And if he's interested in something, that means he has something in mind, and there was no way I was going to bid against him, just to let him have it. I'm sure what he was going to do was much more important than what I was going to do with it. So, and it turned out to be awesome. The crate box racer thing. Never had one, never heard of one, never seen one. And he can't be any older than my oldest brother. And I think he's just a couple of years older than I am. So it's probably a thing of where he was raised. I was the only person in my family that was born here in Suffolk County. My parents had moved here 2 years earlier. Before that, my whole family lived and grew up in Corona, Queens, which isn't too far from where he is, but I don't know if that's where he actually grew up, the town he lives in. I actually went to go there last weekend, and I don't know, there was an issue on the road and traffic, but I never made it to where I wanted to go. Trying to get to where the World's Fair was is what I'm trying to do, Flushing Meadows, and do some photography. But that's a different story. So, Fuller Brush is behind me. I've already put a note out there. I am looking for something from Fuller Brush, something decent, whether it's a brush or one of those push brooms or whatever it was. And I'm going to end it with this. I remember being a little kid. I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, if that. And I remember going in my parents' closet, and there was all these photo albums in there. And I remember opening them up, but they weren't full of photos. They were actually sales brochures. You would open them up and you'd pull out the sales. It was a sales thing to hand the customer when they were interested in a Fuller Brush. And there was stacks of these. And I remember taking all the things out of them a few years later and using them in my photography class when I was in 9th grade and throwing out all those things. Don't even have the books anymore. So that's another thing that'd be cool and interesting. So, okay guys, a little bit of warped history, but there you go.